In terms of the process for restoring the teak, we were hearing a lot of conflicting recommendations, both online and from people that we met, particularly in Port Yasmin, on the best way to go about doing it. The previous owner actually swore by a teak oil that came from Australia, coincidentally, and had a huge supply of that on board. So we were planning to use that, but we also got some other recommendations by other boat owners in the marina who suggested that it was absolutely necessary that we use varnish. We'd already done a decent amount of the oiling by this point, so we decided to take a kind of a different approach and do both. Alright, so the first thing I'm doing to restore all this teak is to mask off all the places where the teak join the fiberglass cabin roof and all the other white pieces of gel coat. The tape we were using was 3M brand Scotch Blue tape, which was recommended to us, and I'm really glad that we took the advice because it was really easy to put down and, more importantly, rip back up when we needed to, even after a couple of weeks. Good taping. So my dad had already done the back-breaking work of scraping off the old and dried varnish or oil. So all there was left to do was the first stage of sanding, which we thought would take a lot less time than it did. For some of the more flat areas like the teak sole of the cockpit, and for some of the stretches of the tow rail that was unimpeded by any kind of rigging, I could use the power sander, but for most of it, it was all hand sanding. Once the majority of the sanding was complete, it was time to move on to applying the teak oil, but first we wet the wood and gave it a good clean. This is the first layer of staining oil. I'll sand it back again tomorrow and then give it another coat. But I found I've got to be really quick because it drips very quickly and I don't want to get it on the gel coat on the deck. The oil we were using was Cabot Australian Timber Oil, which we loved because it really brought out the natural grain of the teak and also gave it a nice deep stain. All the teak restoration had really started to take a toll on the tidiness of Argo, but we were determined to get it done completely and get it done right. And the only real breaks we were having was to do other boat work, but also to go out and get supplies. Lucky enough, there was a good paint shop nearby to Port Yasmin Hammamet. Painting the upward facing part of the teak cockpit sole was quite easy. Painting in the little gaps in between, however, was a completely different story. We wouldn't have bothered to do it, but we did notice that after painting the upward facing part, it was really obvious that the inside of those little gaps were not properly oiled. One of the more fiddly bits of sanding, oiling and varnishing, and something that I wanted to do quite well, was Argo's sign at her stern. I really love the classic look of this sign. Avril not so much, but I'm determined to keep it and determined to make it look nice and shiny and easy to read. After sanding and just applying the oil alone, the teak was actually looking really good and we were kind of tempted just to leave it as is. After all, some people had suggested that that was all we needed to do. We did, however, want something that was going to last the test of time, and we did have several people recommending it to us, so we decided to move on with several layers of varnish, not without sanding back again first. The varnish that we were using was a relatively basic but also inexpensive marine varnish that we bought at a local store. It went on really easily and dried well, so we were happy to keep on using it. I think we went through about 2 or 3 tins in total. So if it wasn't monotonous enough already, this part was certainly the most monotonous and very tedious. We were simply applying varnish, sanding back, cleaning again, applying varnish, sanding back, cleaning, and we did this all 3 times in total. So we decided for the Teak cockpit sole and the passerelle, the ones with all the little gaps in it, that we wouldn't apply varnish but rather just a couple of layers of oil. Now this wasn't out of laziness as you might expect, but more so the fact that if we applied layers of varnish it would probably get really glossy and really slippery, and not only that, for the most part the cockpit sole and the passerelle would be undercover out of direct sunlight, so we weren't worried about it getting weathered too quickly. But also, here's poor Ariel working away, filling those little holes with teak oil, and I couldn't possibly make her do it all again 3 times over for varnish. As sick as we were of doing teak restoration, at this point we were really starting to see the effects, and you could really see the dramatic improvement it had made to the overall appearance of the boat. So this was kind of the motivation that we needed for the homeward stretch. We don't have any blue tape stuck to the gel curtain. And finally, after several layers of varnish, sanding, cleaning and repeating, it was finally time to take off the protective tape, and thankfully because we used the 3M Scotch Blue masking tape, it all came off pretty well. In fact, the only parts of the tape that kind of got stuck was the small amounts that we had used a different kind of tape. So I highly recommend that tape, guys. No. We were really happy with the final results, not just because it looked amazing and completely lifted the overall appearance of Argo, but also because we were feeling quite proud. We had done all of it ourselves, except for the help of the scraping from my dad, of course, and we were really happy with all the work we had accomplished. Thank you so much for watching. This wasn't our normal kind of video. Normally we're uploading videos of our cruising and making crossings, But I thought it was worthwhile going into extra detail for our teak restoration process because we got really great results, and perhaps someone out there could follow it and get some great results too. If you found it worthwhile, please like the video and also subscribe. In the next video, we'll be cruising around all the best spots of Malta.